What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with something a little bit different today. AFA/CIB, Collectibles Investment Brokerage, which is affiliated with AFA, they recently sold some high-grade, loose-graded vintage Star Wars figures, but they were all in old cases. And it got me thinking, I wonder what the price difference is for old cases and high grade of these vintage figures versus new cases. So it's not going to be exact. It's not rocket science, and it's also not perfect. It's not scientifically perfect when it comes to like measuring this stuff. But what I did was I pulled all of the recent sales, or a lot of the recent sales. I didn't pull all of them, but I wanted to show a few before I show you the analysis that I did. And then I also tried to find recent sales in the same or similar grade for the same figure in a new case. So old case versus new case. Is there a price premium? Is there no price premium? If you have an old graded AFA case, and now that AFA is not taking any more submissions for new loose graded figures or for recasing, what does that mean? What does that mean? And is there kind of going to be a price discount to be associated with that? And my gut going into this analysis, I didn't have any data, but I said, of course, there's going to be a price premium for some of these loose graded figures in the new cases versus the old case. That was, going to be my expectation. I just didn't know how much. And some of them were actually pretty surprising. So we're going to dig into that detail right now. So I found a few. Not all of them were CIB related sales, but here's one that was pointed out to me by fellow YouTuber and good friend, the Blacked Out Ewoks. This seller had a number of different walrus men for sale, and they were all apparently the same figure. They were all the mint green PBP Walrus Man. This one had the new case, and it was graded uncirculated 90. That one sold in an auction on February 5th for 170 pounds, which is about $205 US. Now, you got to keep in mind that the price for this one might be slightly discounted just because there were so many for sale all at the exact same time. There was like 8 or 9 of them. But this one had the new case style, and again, it was an uncirculated 90. Light green, pink tusk, no COO. That's a PBP figure. Again, it sold for $205 US. And then he also had an AFA 90, the same figure. Now, it was not an uncirculated 90, so that's the other factor we gotta talk about here, because a lot of these were uncirculated old cases versus non-uncirculated new cases. So there is another kind of variable in play here, which makes this not scientifically relevant, but I thought it was still interesting enough to do it. Anyway, so this is the exact same figure in an AFA 90 old case. That one sold for $179.30 in US dollars. And at the end of this video, stick around because I did put together kind of a summary analysis. I pulled out my Excel spreadsheet and kind of gave you a general idea of what's going on. So next up is a C3PO Hong Kong uncirculated 90. This is one of the examples that CIB sold here recently. That one sold for $355. Big number for an old case style. And then here was one with the new case style. Again, it was not uncirculated. It was just a straight AFA 85. That one sold for $400, free shipping. So for the final analysis on all these, I'm excluding taxes, obviously, because it all depends on where you live. I'm also excluding shipping costs. I'm just talking about the actual final sales price only for this analysis. So that's something else to keep in mind. Here was a no COO Greedo, graded U85, as you can see there. So this is, again, another factor to keep in mind is maybe the COO is not exactly the same for all of these figures. So this was a no COO U85 that sold for $220.72. Here was a Hong Kong. So this is not the exact same COO in this case. So far, they've all been the same COO. But this one was a Hong Kong graded AFA 85. That one sold for $233.50. So even in this case, even though the no COO is a little bit harder to find, in my opinion, versus the Hong Kong for Greedo, and even though this one was an uncirculated designation versus this one had the new case style. It was an easier to find version, and it was also circulated versus uncirculated. So I would argue that it had two negatives going against it versus this comparable, and it still beat it out in price because of the new case style. Next up was a Hong Kong Hammerhead, graded U85 from CIB. That one sold for $142.49 in an auction. And then here was the same figure in just a regular 85, brand new case style, Hong Kong Hammerhead. That one sold for $140. So in this case, this could be a case of people being willing to pay up slightly for an uncirculated designation, even though the grade, the 85 grade was the same, and even though this one had the older case style, they were willing, in this case, to pay up slightly for a hammerhead. And I would argue that hammerhead is one of the easiest figures to find in an 85. They're very, very readily available. For whatever reason, these figures don't degrade very much, and maybe they weren't played with that much, so there's a lot of 85s out there for hammerhead. But anyway, the new case style for this one actually sold a little bit less, but it did not have the uncirculated designation. Here was the AT-AT driver, a Hong Kong orange logo. That was U85. That one sold for $187.47. And then here was a Hong Kong, and this one also was the orange logo, but this was just an AFA 85, but it had the brand new case style, and it sold for significantly more. This one sold for $315. So the brand new case style for at least this Hong Kong orange logo AT-AT driver, exact same figure, even though it was lacking the uncirculated designation, because it had the brand new case style, it sold for a lot more, $315 versus $187.47. Next up was a Hong Kong 21B. This one was graded U85. That one sold for $137.57 in the old case style. And then here is the exact same figure. I think this is the flat finish. So the other one was not the flat finish, but it was still a Hong Kong. It had the brand new case style, and it was an AFA 85. That one sold for $185. So $137.57, and this one was the flat finish, so it was exactly the same figure. Even though it was an uncirculated designation, it didn't get nearly the price that the AFA 85 with the brand new case style got. Next up was a Lando Calrissian. This is the non-white teeth version, which is the much easier version to find, a Hong Kong U85. That one sold for $232.49. And then here was the exact same figure, Hong Kong, but it had the teeth. And this is, I would argue, the more difficult Hong Kong version to find. And it had the brand new case style, and that one sold for $214.50. So it's interesting that even though this one was an easier to find no teeth version of the Hong Kong Lando and the older case style, it still sold for more than the harder to find white teeth version of the Hong Kong Lando with the new case style. So again, that might be attributed to the uncirculated designation, but in my opinion, my experience has been the teeth version of the Hong Kong usually sells for quite a big premium versus the no teeth Hong Kong Lando. But in this case, that was not what happened. Next up was an Ugnaught U85. That one sold for $149.50 in the old case style. And then here was the exact same figure with the brand new case style. That one sold for less. So you just never know. They were both in auctions. They were both fairly recent data points, but $133.50 versus $149.50. Not a huge difference in price, but given that this one does have the newer case style and presents a lot nicer, somebody got a really good deal on this one. And the other factor you got to keep in mind is that maybe this seller, when he was selling all of these beautiful figures, there might have been something else that everyone was clamoring for, and so the Ugnaught got overlooked. That's something we talk about all the time on the channel in terms of a strategy for when there's a lot of items being all listed at the same time by the same seller, all ending at the same time. The more common figures will go for a song and a dance, and that was the case here with the Ugnaught. Next up was an 8D8. That one was a U85, uncirculated 85. That one sold for $139.57. And then this one was an AFA 85, same figure, same case style. That one, or the brand new case style, same figure. That one sold for $202.49. So in this case, they were willing to pay up a lot, and I think a lot of it is tied to presentation. You know, this 8D8 is the oldest case style that AFA used to offer, and it's kind of slid in sideways. It just doesn't present very well. Versus this new one, it's centered inside the case. It's got brackets everywhere to kind of make it look much more aesthetically pleasing. And as a result, the price difference was pretty substantial on that 8D8. Next up was a Klaatu no COO U85. That one sold for $110.50 with the older case style. And then this one was an AFA 85, but the Hong Kong. This was the thick fur painted face. And so it's not the exact apples to apples in terms of the COO, but it did have the brand new case style, and it also did sell in an auction for $152.51. So again, a pretty significant price difference for these two, even though I would argue that the no COO is a little bit harder to find for the Klaatu with the gray limbs. To me, this is a much more difficult variant to find versus the Hong Kong painted face, which is probably the most common of the Klaatus. Yet it still sold for a significant price difference because of the new case style. Next up was a no COO U85 Biker Scout. That one sold for $242.49. And this is the exact same figure, no COO Biker Scout AFA 85 with the new case style, admittedly with the Clearview label up top, which tends to not get as high of a price. Yet in this case, it sold for a slight premium despite having that label up top. And I've told you guys that if you submit to AFA, don't get this kind of case style because it does hold the value back. I would argue that this one with the thin arms and legs, AFA 85 with a new case style, if it had the original classic style label on the inside of the case instead of up top, I bet it would blow past $300 all day long. But that's just my guess. So that's just gives you a random sampling of old versus new cases. I tried to get it as close as I could for COO and for grade. Obviously, the uncirculated designation also plays another factor. But here is a general summary. And I didn't show everything, but I did find some other examples. And where appropriate, I tried to match them up as best I could. As you can see, for the squid head, for the general Lando, and for the forelamb, I could not find data points that were AFA. So I included CAS 90 versus uncirculated AFA 90s. For the Lando and squid head, they were UKG 90s. And we all know that UKG and CAS items tend to not command the same price as an AFA example. But it's old case versus new case. We had the old case final sales price. Again, it's before shipping and taxes versus the new case final sales price. And the differences were pretty different. You know, it was a pretty wide range of values, as you'd expect, depending on the figure, depending on what else is out there at the time, whether the seller had other items. But I looked at the price difference, and the price difference on the high end was a difference of 68% of old new versus new case style, that one being the AT-AT driver with the orange logo. It was a U85 versus an 85, and the price difference was 68% higher. On the other end of the spectrum, we had the 8D8, which was a U85 versus a new case style of 85, and the price difference was, no, I'm sorry, not the 8D8, for the Ugnaught. So the Ugnaught was a U85 versus an 85, and it was actually less. So it went for 10% or almost 11% less. So again, the percentage difference in price between new case style and old case style, it's all over the map, as you'd expect. But I wanted to at least give you some pretty decent data points here. We probably got about 20 figures or so, everything from last 17 to early figures, to early first 21 figures. And the average percentage difference in price that I came up with based on this very limited data set was 17.6% for a new case versus an old case. Again, I tried to match it up as best I could with grade. The uncirculated designation obviously played a factor for a number of these because they were almost all uncirculated designations for this data sample set. So I would argue if it was old case grade without the uncirculated designation, this percentage difference of 17.6% would be even more substantial. I bet it would be 25 to 30% difference. But that's just a guess. But given how recent the data was and the fact that I was able to find other data points with the new case styles, I just thought it was a good time to do this analysis. And I don't know if you guys find this kind of information useful or as interesting as I do, but I just thought it would be kind of a fun exercise to share with you. And again, the average difference for all of these different figures was about 18% or 17 to 18%. And I just thought it would be kind of a fun exercise. So I hope you enjoyed taking a look at it. Thanks again for watching, and I'll be back soon.